We covered the preface, and in the preface, Srila Prabhupada explains the title, the term Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the original, so to say, Sanskrit name of this book, which Srila Prabhupada translates as the Nectar of Devotion. Then we also discussed the significance of Srila Rupa Goswami, why Rupa Goswami is so important for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, for ISKCON, for the followers of Srila Prabhupada. And we identified Prabhupada's purposes in writing the Nectar Devotion and discussed their relevance. So Prabhupada wrote this book because this is the law book of the Krishna consciousness movement. So these were some of the few points that we covered last time. So today we will talk about the definition of pure devotional service. So how do we define what is pure devotional service? Because after all, the topic of this book is devotional service. It is bhakti, bhakti rasamrita sindhu, right? So Rupa Goswami in the very first verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu defines what is bhakti, what is pure devotional service. So our objectives today, and let's see if we get through it, is to explain the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with reference to Vrindavan Krishna, who is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, present an overview of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and specifically the Purva Vibhaga, which is the section that we will cover in Bhakti Shastri. So actually, I won't be giving a full overview of Nectar Devotion, just the Purva Vibhaga, the first part, and then explain the definition of pure devotional service, which I just mentioned, the two parts of it, the Swarupa and Tathashta Lakshana, and I'll be going over this all again, so don't worry if you don't understand what these points are. And finally, discuss examples of pure and mixed devotional service. So we'll try to see if we can come up with some good examples to illustrate the concepts. So every book, every Vaishnav text starts with a Mangalacharan, just like we are always reciting the Mangalacharan that Srila Prabhupada has given us. The Mangalacharan invokes auspiciousness. It is the prayer that the author begins the book with. And quite interestingly, it also identifies the objective of the book. So in that prayer, the author will also tell this is what the objective is. Just like in our Mangalacharan that we recite at the beginning of every class, Srila Prabhupada is praying. He's praying to the previous acharyas, to his spiritual master. He's praying to Rupa Goswami. He's praying to Krishna. He's praying to Srimati Radharani. He's praying to all the Vaishnavas and Lord Chaitanya, the Panchatattva, for their mercy. Yet in praying, he's also telling us this is the goal. The goal of our readings is He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. That the goal of our studies is to reach Krishna. And which Krishna? The Krishna who is the lover of Srimati Radharani. The Krishna who is the lover of the gopis. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu, who's very compassionate. Gopesha Gopika Kanta, who's the Lord of the gopis. So we are approaching him, but in a specific mood, in a specific rasa. And that is the rasa that Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas and Lord Chaitanya are imparting to the readers. So other sampradayas are giving other rasas, but this is the rasa that is the goal of this reading or this sampradaya. So in the same way, in the introduction and in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami gives a Mangalacharan, invokes auspiciousness, and in doing so also suggests the objective of this book. So, what is this? Prabhupada translates it as Lord Shri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the reservoir of all rasas or relationships. So, this is Lord Shri Krishna, who is the cause of all causes. So this is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're not speaking of some demigod here. This book is not about Indra or Varuna um, some great politician. It is about God, the cause of all causes. But this God is not just God. He's not just the Big Bang, which is the cause of all causes. This God, this source, is the reservoir of all rasas, is also a person and the reservoir of all relationships. And we are interested in this person who is the source of all relationships and the embodiment of all rasas. And what is the specific name that Rupa Goswami refers to Krishna as is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. So he is the Murti, the form of all Akhila Rasa Amrita, of all the nectarian mellows, of all the nectarian relationships. Krishna is the form of all of these relationships. So this relates with Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, right? The book is about the mellows of the nectar of the ocean of bhakti. And now, as we will see in the definition of pure devotional service, which is still to come, and which we are getting into now, it's saying that rasamrita and that ocean can only find its goal. It is directly related with Akhila Rasamrita Murti. So that bhakti, because it is the ocean of rasas or mellows, it can only be directed, it can only find its object in Akhila Rasamrita Murti, which is Vrindavan Krishna. Not just any Krishna, but Vrindavan Krishna. Because in other forms of Krishna, all the rasas are not there. For example, in Dvarka Krishna, who is Vasudev Krishna, the rasa of Parakiya Bhav, which is unwedded love, is not there. So therefore, there's some rasa that is missing. But Akhila Rasamrita Murti is that form of Krishna in which all the rasas are present. And therefore we say Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Therefore we say that the most complete form of God is Krishna, and therefore we will only worship Vrindavan Krishna. Because in every other form it is fully Krishna, but he's not exhibiting all the rasas. Therefore it is a limited understanding, or you could say limited realization of, I should not say limited, it's still unlimited, but it's not you could say it's not the summum bonum as Krishna as God depicting his full grandeur in terms of all of his different rasas. So that is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, Krishna, who is the form of these unlimited rasas. So Srila Prabhupada, in a lecture, he explains this further. He says, so we can enjoy Krishna's loving service in so many ways, not only by the embrace of the gopis, but in the fight of Bhishma with Krishna and piercing his body with arrows. Therefore, Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita. There are 12 rasas, either primary or secondary rasa. Any rasa, Krishna is ready to respond to any rasa you want to deal with Krishna. That is Krishna's position. So we may think, well, Vrindavan Krishna does not fight with bows and arrows. Like here, Prabhupada has given the example of Bhishma. So why is Vrindavan Krishna Akhilara Samrita Murti? It's because all the other Krishnas, like Vasudeva Krishna, are coming from Vrindavan Krishna, so to say. In Vrindavan Krishna, Krishna is also fighting with the demons. All the rasas are there, but in as Vasudeva Krishna, he is exhibiting certain rasas, certain aspects uh, of his nature, but not all the aspects. But as Vrindavan Krishna, he is exhibiting all of them, and then he expands himself as Vasudeva Krishna, and then he exhibits some of them in his fight with Bhishma, etc. So we can understand Krishna and his greatness, uh, and you could say we cannot understand it, but we can only see all of his different rasas in his Vrindavan pastimes. So after this Mangalacharan, after describing the objective of this book and giving a benediction, a prayer to the Lord, um, we come to the overview of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which I think I mentioned last time, that this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is divided into 4 parts: the eastern, the southern, the western, and the northern. So there's 4 sections of this ocean of bhakti. And we should understand that the book is divided in 4 parts because this reflects the nature of bhakti. Bhakti also has these, 4, you could say, 4 directions. And the section that we are dealing with is the first one, which is called Bhagavad Bhakti Bedha, which is varieties of devotional service. And this is the eastern part, the eastern section. The other sections go into the details of the rasas, of the different mellows. And today I will not cover those other sections. But in this section, the eastern section, is the first 19 chapters. And this is how it's broken down. And I'm not covering the rest just so we don't do overload. Otherwise, it'll be an information overload. Already you'll see there's quite a bit here. So the first introduction and first chapter, which we are covering today, actually more just the introduction, that is called Samanya Bhakti. This is the shortest part, but in some ways the most important part. And the other chapters will cover more quickly, but this chapter we spend more time because it's the theme of the entire book. The introduction and the first chapter is called Samanya Bhakti, or the principles, the basics, the essentials of bhakti. Then chapters 2 to 16 are dealing with sadhana bhakti, or bhakti yoga in practice. Bhakti yoga in practice. Regulated bhakti yoga. Chapters 17 and 18. So as you can see, this part is most relevant to us. Therefore, Rupa Goswami spends the most amount of time speaking about sadhana bhakti. Then we have bhava bhakti, which is chapters 17 and 18. So this is bhava bhakti, chapters 17 and 18. And then finally, 19 is prema bhakti. So in this section, Rupa Goswami takes us from the very essentials of bhakti all the way up to prema bhakti. Now you might feel, well, this is everything. How could there be something beyond this? So the rest of the book is basically talking about different moods and rasas of prema bhakti. So it's an ocean after this as well. But this first section takes us all the way to prema bhakti, and therefore Srila Prabhupada thought, well, this is our core text. This is the basic text that we are covering in Bhakti Shastri. So we can imagine what our realization is, where according to Srila Prabhupada, this is introductory knowledge. And that's what we cover in this section. Of course, our process is the most simple and sublime. So in that introductory also is the most deepest knowledge. So we should also not feel that this is a lower knowledge than what's coming. Actually, this is the philosophical section of the Nectar devotion. The rest is more descriptive, describing the activities of the residents of Vrindavan. So therefore, it's actually very, very relevant to us, very deep. In the first part, there are 4 waves. So in this eastern part, there are 4 waves. In the eastern section of the ocean, there are 4 waves. The first being a general description of devotional service. The second concerns the regulated principles for executing devotional service. And the third wave, devotional service in ecstasy. In the fourth is the ultimate goal, which is love of God. So what is the name of the first wave, which is the general description of devotional service? Someone can say, what is that called in Sanskrit?
Samanya Bhakti.
Yes, Samanya Bhakti.
Bhakti.
Yes, Samanya Bhakti. So that's the first, the general description of devotional service. The second concerns the regulated principles of executing devotional service. What is that?
Sadhana Bhakti.
Sadhana Bhakti. The third wave is devotional service in ecstasy.
Bhava Bhakti.
Bhava Bhakti.
Bhava
And,
Bhakti.
yes, and the ultimate goal, love of God, is
Prema Bhakti.
Prema
Prema
Bhakti.
Bhakti. Yes. So this is okay. So now the definition of pure devotional service. This verse is probably a verse that you will quote or remember most often in your spiritual life. Maybe you already know this. If you don't know it, then you'll learn it today. And once you do know it, I guarantee you, this will be one of the most useful verses in your own spiritual practice and in your preaching. So this verse is Anya Vilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktiruttama. Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktiruttama. And this verse is the Paribhashya Sutra of the Nectar devotion, meaning that the Paribhashya Sutra is like the sutra that is the essence of the entire book. From this sutra comes everything else. This sutra defines or summarizes everything in this text. So what is this? This is the definition. And it is a definition of pure devotional service. And every definition in traditional Sanskrit grammar and vocabulary has 2 parts. And this definition of pure devotional service, we will also see, has 2 parts to it. So this is the translation of this verse. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires. Knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and fruit of action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So this is the translation that Srila Prabhupada has given. And when reading the English translation, it is easy to miss the very important points that Srila Prabhupada is making as part of this definition. And so therefore we will look at this word by word. It's all present here in this translation, but we will look at the verse and translation word by word. Once again, I'll read it again. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and fruit of action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. Okay. So I mentioned to you how the definition of pure devotional service, or any definition, has 2 parts. The first part is called the Swarupa Lakshana, meaning Lakshana means characteristics. Swarupa means primary characteristics. It's interesting, even in English and in logic, sort of philosophy, they talk about this in metaphysics. Um, a thing is defined by certain essential qualities. So someone might ask, um, who is Gopal Haridas? Well, a Swarupa Lakshana, a primary characteristic, would be that he is a human being. Right? In metaphysics, this is just an example. So that is what essentially distinguishes me from uh, another species. So someone, for example, may be, or a child, for example, may have less intelligence than a chimpanzee. Like a chimpanzee, you'll see they know how to take a blanket and cuddle up or cover themselves in a blanket. In the zoo, I've seen it in Africa. They have these places, and the chimpanzees, they're very they're functioning. They have their little bunk bed. They'll get into their bunk bed and they'll get into uh, their covers and sleep. A small child may not be able to even do that. They can't even remove the cloth above them. But why is a chimpanzee um, not a person, and the child is still a person? And this is because the child has a Swarup Lakshana of being a human being, whereas the chimpanzee does not. And the child does not have the characteristic of being able to cover himself with a blanket, whereas the chimpanzee does, yet is still not considered a person. So Swarup Lakshana means essential characteristics. To define a person, there's certain essential characteristics. Then there's Tatashta Lakshana, which is marginal characteristics or secondary characteristics. So a secondary characteristic of a person is that they should be able to cover themselves with a blanket. But even if they don't have that characteristic, they can still be a human being. But if a person is not a human being, then we would say they are, well, if they're not a human being, then they're an animal. So there are certain essential characteristics and marginal characteristics of all things in this world. In the same way, pure devotional service, in this definition, Rupa Goswami mentions certain essential characteristics, things that definitely define what pure devotional service is, and certain marginal characteristics. So the Swarup Lakshanas of this verse is 3 words. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. These 3 words define the essential characteristics. Anukulyena Krishna and Anushilanam. Now let's go back to the verse here that we found here. Here. So where does this appear? The Swarup Lakshana, the essential characteristics, appear in the second part of the verse. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. The final 2 words are Bhaktir Uttama. This is pure Uttama Bhakti. So this is also very common practice in Sanskrit, that in a definition, the most important part of the definition comes at the end, not at the beginning. So this is the second 2 lines. And the first 2 lines, Anya Vilashata Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavrtam, these are the Tatashta Lakshana, the secondary characteristic. So Tatashta Lakshana Anya Vilashata Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavrtam. So now, what do these words mean? Anukulyena. Anukulyena. Would anyone like to guess what Anukulyena means?
Favorable?
Favorable.
Yes, favorable. So pure devotional service must be favorable. It must be favorably done for Krishna. So if someone is thinking of Krishna continuously, but they are thinking in an unfavorable way, then that bhakti is not pure. It is still bhakti. Thinking of Krishna is always bhakti, but it is not pure. So bhakti must be done favorably. So it is pleasing to Krishna. Favorable means, what does favorable mean? That we are doing bhakti not in the way that we want to do it, but in the way that Krishna wants us to do it. So if someone says, I am loving God by going and destroying a building, bombing a building, and this is my service to God, then is it service? Well, the sentiment might be devotion, that I'm doing this as a service to God. But it is not pure devotion because it is not pleasing to Krishna. It is bhakti, but it's not being done in the way that Krishna wants to be served. So the devotion that is pure must be performed with the intention to please Krishna. So, for example, in Srila Prabhupada's pastimes, on this planet, when he was on 26 Second Avenue, one hippie who was on drugs, walked into his storefront, and he walked in with 3 rolls of toilet paper. He went into the toilet, he used the toilet, and then he left, after, using it himself, the toilet roll, he left 3 rolls of toilet roll there. And Srila Prabhupada commented that how that person had performed devotional service. Just see the devotees' mercy and their kindness, that how they will accept even the slightest service and never forget it. It's that service is now in the annals of history. It's written in the Prabhupada Lamrit. So that service was service for Krishna, because that person unknowingly served a pure devotee, left extra rolls of toilet roll, which all the guests used, and it was one less worry for Srila Prabhupada. But was it done with the intention to please Krishna? Maybe not. And so therefore that service made that person advance in spiritual life. It was devotional service, but it was not on the level of pure devotional service, because it was not done intentionally, favorably, with the desire to please Krishna. There's a difference of quality in that person's service and the service that Srila Prabhupada was doing for Krishna very conscientiously and intentionally. So bhakti is any service to Krishna, but pure bhakti is only when it's done with an intention to please Krishna and with a favorable mood and in the way that Krishna wants. So now that's the other part here. So it must be done anukulina. Actually, I went a little ahead of myself. This is just saying favorable. But favorable, if it's done favorably, but pure devotion is not if it's done favorably to Shiva. Pure bhakti or pure love can only be done if it's done to Krishna. We should understand Krishna to mean Krishna and his personal expansions. So Krishna includes all such expansions as well as his pure devotees. So one cannot say that they're doing pure bhakti to a demigod. Pure bhakti, that they can be doing bhakti. You can have devotion for your family members. You can have devotion for your leader, for your president, for your demigod. You can have devotion for Sai Baba, but pure devotion you can only have for Krishna. Pure bhakti cannot exist. You actually cannot love someone unconditionally in the way that this verse is stating. You cannot love someone other than Krishna in that unconditional way, because all other love will always have some business aspect to it. You cannot love a demigod unconditionally. Why? Because unless they give you what you're asking them for, the material benedictions, you won't serve them. It's only in the case of Krishna that we can love him unconditionally, and Krishna can love us unconditionally. So then someone may say, well, what about the pure devotees of the Lord? So Rupa Goswami here explains that Krishna means Krishna and his paraphernalia and his expansions. And this includes the pure devotees. The pure devotees are not Krishna, but they're included in Krishna. They are, Krishna says, the devotee, I accept them as good as my own self. So that is the pure devotee, that Krishna accepts them as good as his own self. So therefore, love for them can also be part of pure devotional service. So if a person serves Srila Prabhupada, serves a spiritual master, uh, in this definition, in the same definition, then that is pure devotional service.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I just have one quick question.
Yes.
So when you say like pure devotional service cannot be performed to demigods, so but we have heard stories of like Myanmars in the south. There are like 64 Myanmars who are like who seem to be like pure devotees of Shiva, who don't expect like there's one Myanmar who removed his eyes and gave it to Shiva because he couldn't see, and we see all these stories down here. And
Mm,
how do we consider that? Is that not pure devotional service, or how do we
mm.
consider that?
Yes, very nice question. So if we are serving Lord Shiva as a devotee of the Lord, so in that mood of selfless, spontaneous devotion that Lord Shiva has for Krishna, we are worshiping Lord Shiva as a devotee of the Lord, not wanting anything in return, then that can be pure devotional service. However, according to Rupa Goswami's definition, even if someone is accepting Lord Shiva to be God and worshiping them only for love for Shiva, so only out of love for Shiva, that cannot be pure devotional service. And I know that this will be very shocking, but even Narayan and Vishnu, one cannot come to the platform of Uttama Bhakti. It is Krishna. This is why he says the word Krishna. Now, of course, Krishna includes all such expansions. So Narayan and Vishnu are included, and one can practice pure bhakti because they're non-different than Krishna. But still, that is because they're expansions of Krishna. In other words, Krishna has to be, Krishna has to be part of the picture. No one can exhibit or have those. So sadhana bhakti is pure devotional service. But the highest forms of pure devotional service, like bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, they can only be directed towards Krishna. So the real, and right now we really cannot imagine or appreciate what pure devotion is, but the real pure devotion has to be on the level of spontaneous love. And that spontaneous love, which is beyond rules and regulations, only happens in relationship with Krishna. When it is actually the flowing of the heart. So, like for example, the example that you're giving of this devotee who gave his eyes to Lord Shiva, um, we don't know. Was it because of rules and regulations that he knew his intelligence was telling him this is how I should serve Lord Shiva? Or was it out of an overflowing of love within his heart for Lord Shiva that he was doing it? I don't know, but I cannot say. But according to Rupa Goswami's definition, that overflowing of love, bhava and prema, that those feelings, that relationship, that rasa, can only find its goal, its ashraya, its shelter in Krishna. So, one point to mention here, and I forgot to mention this last time, is that in the preface, this is one of your homework questions. Prabhupada describes bhakti as a beam of light. Our love or bhakti or any love itself is like a beam of light. So it comes from a limited source, which is us, right? We are limited and it shines from us. But A beam of light comes from a flashlight. It is very limited, but it expands and it has no end. You cannot find the end. You cannot see the end of where the beam of light ends. Similarly, you cannot find the limit of its expansion. So love is like that. Prabhupada gives that example because it wants it wants to be unlimited, and because the demigods are limited, that bhakti cannot find proper shelter with them. That love will always be dissatisfying. And therefore, our love in this material world, all of our relationships in this material world, will be inherently dissatisfying if they're on the material level. And that's why actually Krishna consciousness, it really takes off the pressure, because it just lets us know to begin with that we should have correct expectations in our material relationships. To begin with, we should know it will be dissatisfying. So we should not be surprised if it is. Very, very deep lesson there, very deep point there, that we should not be surprised if it's dissatisfying. That is the nature. I was once talking to an elderly gentleman, and he was saying, I know, he said, every relationship, he was speaking, on the material level, about his relatives and his extended family. Everyone's just looking out for themselves. So he actually had very good relationships with his family members. So he was saying, this is why I have such good relationships, because I know everyone is just thinking of themselves. So I don't expect anything more from them. I I I reciprocate and deal on that level. So I never feel hurt when they betray me, because I know, I expect that this, I've seen it so many times. He's an old man, he'd seen it so many times. So he said, everyone is selfish, including myself. So I don't feel surprised. This is the material relationship. This is the meaning of it. Because it is dissatisfying, because that light, that love is not able to find a unlimited object. But because Krishna is unlimited, and Krishna's expansions and his representatives who are representing him can communicate that unlimited love to Krishna, therefore we find that satisfaction. Therefore we find that great solace in loving Krishna. And that perfect satisfaction that we don't find elsewhere. So bhakti means to Krishna. And many of our acharyas like Raghunath Das Goswami and others, they actually are sometimes very strict on this point, that Krishna means Krishna, not even to Narayan or Vishnu. But certainly the residents of Vaikuntha are pure devotees of the Lord, performing pure devotional service. But as we will see, there's many levels of pure devotional service, and bhava and prema are only towards in relation to Krishna. So anushilanam, then the final word, final Swarup Lakshana is anushilanam. So shilanam means, anu means following. This is a Sanskrit word. You put anu before anything, it means following. Anushilanam. And it also means, a second meaning of the word is constantly. This also is very important. So anu means following, and it also means constantly. And shilana means activity or behavior. So a Svarup Lakshana, an essential characteristic of bhakti, is activity or behavior. Your activity, which is part of your behavior, is favorably done, which is anukulyena, for Krishna. Bhakti is activity, it is not just sentiment. But what activity is it? It is not just any activity, it is not our made up activity that I say bhakti is this. This is what I say devotional service is. No, it is Anushilanam. It is activity that is following in the footsteps of the devotees of the Lord. That is pure bhakti. So I may do my own bhakti, and that will be bhakti, but that's not pure bhakti. Pure bhakti is bhakti that is done Anushilanam. Otherwise, as we will see later on, Rupa Goswami says that bhakti is an unnecessary disturbance in society. And pure devotion is devotion that is done constantly, or that is, one can do pure devotional service if one is acting constantly for Krishna in the footsteps of the acharyas. So now we'll go into detail on this. This Anushilanam part is very important. The particular word used by Srila Rupa Goswami in this connection is Anushilana, or cultivation by following the predecessor acharyas. As soon as we say cultivation, we must refer to activity. Without activity, consciousness alone cannot help us. So Prabhupada defines bhakti in two English words, not in one, which is very interesting. In all of his books, right, he says, perform devotional service. And it's funny if you read other scholars, throughout their books, they'll say devotion, bhakti, devotion. Um, like they'll say devotion for God, or feeling for God, or love for God. But Prabhupada says devotional service for God. And you think, wow, some scholars have even criticized Prabhupada. Why does he translate bhakti as devotional service? If you look it up in the Sanskrit dictionary, bhakti means love. It doesn't mean devotional service. Bhakti just means devotion. But Prabhupada is using Rupa Goswami's definition that devotion must mean activity. Anushilanam, devotion is activity. It is one's behavior. There's no pure devotion that is just always going to be in our heart. If it is in our heart, it has to explode out in the form of our service to the Lord. The word anu suggests that one should engage himself in the service of the Lord without any interval. He must engage in the service 100% and always. There must not be any interruption in such progress of devotional service. So now we're getting to the second definition of anu. One is following, the other is constantly. Because following means constantly. If I follow someone, then I don't leave them, I follow them. So it has to be done constantly, uninterrupted. If he's not continuously engaged in the cultivation of devotional service, it can't be called Uttama Bhakti. It is not pure devotional service. So someone may say that, well, I came, or someone may think that, well, this person came and they performed devotional service for Krishna with favorable intent, and they served for 2 hours, and they did pure devotional service for 2 hours. Well, what here Rupa Goswami is saying that they did devotional service for 2 hours, but if they're not performing devotional service constantly, it cannot be pure devotional service. Which means, very deep point again, it's not easy to do pure devotional service, because we can do it with the right intention, we can do it for Krishna, but can we do it constantly? Prabhupada was doing it constantly. Great devotees of the Lord are doing it constantly, but I at least know I'm not doing it constantly. So a long way to go. Someone might come into the temple and the deity might inspire him, and he might put some money in the box just to please the deity, or he might want to sing some bhajan just to please the deity, and then he goes out and does everything else. So that's not pure devotional service. It has to be a systematic cultivation. So especially like in India, we see so many people out of bhava, they will come and do some bhakti. Just one of my relatives, I was speaking, and she was saying, I am listening to Bhagavat 3 hours a day. we were encouraging her to chant every single day, chant, 4 rounds every day or 8 rounds every day. And she was saying, I'm listening to Bhagavad 2 or 3 hours a day. Um, so is she doing bhakti? Yes, she is. But what is special about Prabhupada's process, that when there's systematic cultivation, that it is, in other words, anushilanam, it is done following in the footsteps, and it is done constantly, every single day, 16 rounds, then it starts to become pure devotional service. And there's so much bhakti in this world, but what is special about Prabhupada's process? What is special about the devotees who have dedicated themselves or committed themselves to this process? Why do we see more spiritual potency in them? We see it because of this systematic cultivation. They have decided to follow a path, follow a teacher, and they've decided to change their continuous behavior. Their whole lifestyle is only for the service of Krishna. So, Sarup Lakshana is Anukulyena, Krishna should get pleasure from it. Favorably done, this means, another way to put it, Krishna should get pleasure from it, not that I get pleasure from it. Who is it? What bhakti is it when I get pleasure from it, but Krishna does not? That is sahaja. So the sahaja wants to go and sing bhajans and just be a bhajan singer because they love the ragas, but they may not be doing service that is pleasing to Krishna in the way that Krishna wants it to be done. So it is done bhakti, but not for Krishna's pleasure. Devotees' attitude towards Krishna should be favorable. It should be done for Krishna. Krishna means Krishna and his various expansions and the pure devotees, Krishna's paraphernalia even. So we can do service for Krishna's altar. We can clean the altar, and that can be pure devotional service. We can do service for Krishna's temple because it's Krishna's paraphernalia. In the Prabhupada, he one time mentioned in Vrindavan, he saw that the temple room was dirty. And in the Vrindavan temple, the marble is black and white. It's a checkered. It's kind of, they put black marble, white marble, and like this. Very beautiful in that temple. And Krishna on the altar is blackish in color. And Balaram, it's Krishna Balaram temple. Balaram is white. And when Srila Prabhupada, he went there, he saw that the altar was so beautiful. Krishna was looking so beautiful, but the temple was dirty. And so he spoke with the devotees and he said that this black and white marble floor of this temple is non-different than the black and white deity that you see on the altar of Krishna and Balaram. Cleaning this temple is as important as serving Krishna. It is as important devotional service as serving Krishna on the altar. Why? Because Krishna's paraphernalia is part of Krishna. And we can perform pure devotional service to Krishna's paraphernalia. So someone cleaning the temple is also performing pure devotional service. Someone serving the deity is also performing pure devotional service if they are doing it by this mood and process. And the most important part of it is what? Among even the three, this is the most important. Anushilanam, constant activity following in the predecessor acharyas. Following in the footsteps of the acharyas. If we do it with speculation, with sentiment, with fanaticism, then that bhakti will not bring the fruit of devotion, a pure devotion to Krishna. So that must be anushilanam. Activity done in anu, following the footsteps of the acharyas. So this was the Swarup Lakshana. Now I will go over the Tatashta Lakshana. What are the secondary characteristics? That is further definitions of pure devotional service. And as we will see, this part really just more sharply crystallizes the first part. This part of Anushilanam, Anukulyena, favorably done for Krishna, is being further defined. What is that? If you're doing it for Krishna and only for Krishna, then you will be Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. That is, Anya, other, Abhilasha, desires, Ita, motive, Shunyam. There will be zero other desires. So as you can see, this is sort of the Tatasha Lakshana, or the secondary characteristics, are like the flip side of the primary characteristics. Re-emphasis, more emphasis, and more detail. If you're doing it for Krishna, plan on giving up all other motives. Don't plan on being famous through your service. Don't plan on becoming a great devotee through your service. Don't plan on going to the spiritual world as a result of your service. Although Prabhupada says we can have that desire. We can have that desire because that is Krishna's desire. Therefore, we can have that desire. Krishna wants us to come back to Godhead. Therefore, desire. But still, the devotee is ultimately doing a service only to love Krishna, to please Krishna. So, no other motives. Anya bilashita shunyam. Give up all other motivation, then our service will be pure, devoid of all material desires. Any material desires. Raghunath Das Goswami specifically mentions the desire, which he says is the most difficult to give up, the desire for honor and prestige, honor and fame. We all want to be honored. We can give up our material, attachments, all these things. But when we come to bhakti, then we at least want to be honored as a devotee. And if we're not honored, then we have a tendency of giving up our devotional service. If we're insulted, then we have a tendency of giving up our service to Krishna. And that is very difficult to overcome. That in spite of being dishonored, to still continue our devotional service. In spite of so many difficulties and material tribulations, to continue our devotion to Krishna. Jnana karma dhyanavritam. So we give up all material motivation, yet all material desires, yet um, we still want to merge in Krishna. So no material desire, but still some spiritual desire, some spiritual aspiration. Jnana, impersonal philosophy. Here, jnana refers to the impersonalist philosophy in particular. Karma, fruit of activity. Let me serve Krishna and gradually become Brahma. No, Adi, or Adi means jnana karma. Adi, also like artificial detachment, mystic yoga. People, they become uh, sages in caves, to become hermits. They become mystic yogis to really feel good about their life as really detached people. So they don't have material desires, but they have some other material desire, which is to have the great feeling of detachment. These are anarthas, and pure bhakti is free from jnana, from the anartha of mental speculation, fruit of activities, and these other types of yogas. One book that I really recommend is The Journey Home by Radhanath Maharaj. Um, it's and I really recommend not reading it, but I recommend hearing the audiobook. So Maharaj has actually recited the entire book, like he's narrated it as an audiobook, and it's available on Audible. You can just download it on Amazon. Basically, it's available, and you can hear the whole book. It's so touching, and um, uh, in his journey, he describes how he's uh, he's already born kind of a detached. He has he's already born on the platform, so to say, of Brahman realization, and probably more, but at least what he's describing in his story. And so he becomes very attached to the life of a mystic yogi. Like he enjoys living in caves and not eating much and just living off of literally nothing. It's unbelievable, like the austerities that he could tolerate are extraordinary. They're otherworldly, and he was associating with people similarly like that. People that you find like in Badrinath, they're not eating anything. They're just living in the cold, and still they are leading healthy lives because they're mystic yogis. And then when he meets Srila Prabhupada and when he meets the devotees, then he realizes how he had given up the entire world, but even the but his but he's attached to the life of mystic yoga. Even the life of the mystic yogi, of the cave life, was a form of attachment. And he finds Srila Prabhupada to be his spiritual master because he relieves him of, he was the only one who relieves him of even that attachment. So, if someone, he meets these mystic yogis who are self realized souls and who were genuinely, in touch with God, and they were, like very extraordinary persons, as he describes. But they still had that very minor attachment to being detached, to feeling better than others, to feel better than others, to not be on that level of love for Krishna, which does include detachment. We have to be very careful. Love for Krishna doesn't mean now I'm just gonna eat 30 gulam jamuns a day, and we see Raghunath Das Goswami, all the different Goswamis of Vrindavan, they exhibited the greatest detachment. Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, 1 cup of buttermilk every day. But that was a detachment out of a natural love for Krishna. It was not detachment for detachment's sake. It was not renunciation for renunciation's sake. And that is, when we reach that point, that is the point of pure love. So yes, the vivid example of this is Maharaj's book. So if you can download the audiobook and listen to it. We went on a long drive when I went to Chicago to the new place where I'm moving. It was a 5-hour drive each way, and we just heard the audiobook on the way, and it was the best drive we had. It was just like we were just completely absorbed the entire time, and the way he narrates it also is just so touching. So I'm not doing this because he's my spiritual master. I'm actually not his disciple. I'm doing this because genuinely it's a very, very moving book. And especially hearing it from his own voice, it's very touching. So bhakti is something that is not covered. It is not covered by jnana or karma. And these other things. So it can have detachment in it, but it's not covered by it. So, very interesting quote here Prabhupada describes that is very relevant to us. Anavritam means uncovered by mental speculation or fruitive activities. Karma, kanda, jnana, karmadhyanavritam, not covered. If you mix up karma with bhakti, if you mix up jnana with bhakti, or if you mix up yoga, it is contaminated. It is not pure. I was actually very shocked when I read this quote from Srila Prabhupada. He says, if you mix it up with yoga, it is contaminated. So, yoga can be a very powerful preaching tool, a very powerful way of bringing people in. Yoga can also be very nice to keep our body in proper order so that we can serve Krishna. But we should not mix yoga with bhakti. We should not think that, um, yoga is kind of the same as bhakti, and become so much involved in yoga that it becomes a principle or an important practice of our bhakti. That is not pure bhakti. Similarly, the cultivation of knowledge in of itself is not pure bhakti. what Prabhupada is giving us is something very, very pure. And therefore, he didn't, take the pains of teaching us Ashtanga yoga or Hatha yoga, even though devotees do that today. I myself, I always, a few times a week, I do yoga just because I'm sitting all day and I need it. But just because we do yoga, we should not think that it is part of bhakti. It can serve bhakti, it can assist us in devotion, but it's not the essence of bhakti. Pure devotional service is given by Rupa Goswami. Anya bilashita shunyam. No desire for fruitive activities or philosophical speculation or yogic, mystic yogi magic. Again, Prabhupada emphasizes this. The same words that Maharaj heard from Prabhupada. Mystic yoga, magic, these things are not bhakti. No, simply how to satisfy Krishna. That is bhakti. Anukulyena means what is favorable, what Krishna desires. That is first class bhakti. That is first class bhakti. So pure bhakti is is really what Prabhupada showed us, and therefore we follow by example. The New Age movements, our different styles, they're very nice for preaching, but ultimately we bring people to the point of Prabhupada's process, which is what he showed us, which is um, Prabhupada's process, as we'll see more as we study Nectar devotion, is sadhana bhakti, but it is sadhana bhakti aimed towards Raganuga bhakti. It is actually Raganuga bhakti done in the form of sadhana. And therefore, his practices, his specific process has special significance. It's not random or it's not whimsical in the way that he chose the process, because it is process that is done with you could say, the intensity of loving Krishna in a spontaneous way. The chanting, the kirtan, the serving of the deity, the reading of Bhagavatam, particularly these books, these inspire the mood of loving Krishna in a spontaneous way. Even though we do it in a regulated way, and we must do it as we start Mangalarti, these things in a regulated way, but these practices lead us to a spontaneous attraction in ways that yoga and mystic yoga and things do not. In the verse, the phrase Anya Bilashta Shunyam has not been used. Instead, the phrase Anya Bilashta Shunyam has been chosen. This means devoid of other desires, which are as deep rooted as one's nature. So, this is a quote. The quote completes in the next slide, so that's why you don't see the reference here. This is a quote from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So, he's saying, so if a person does by chance have another desire, can that person not do pure devotional service? Is that person completely unqualified for pure devotional service? Let's say some desire comes in a person's mind. Is that person not able to do? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying Anya Vilashita Shunya means, so no ulterior motive, zero motive means no ulterior desires which are as deep as one's nature. So what does this mean? He'll explain now. And one point here I must say, okay, so this is the difference. Yeah, I was trying to remember. So in the verse, the phrase Anya Bilasha Shunyam has not been used. Instead, the phrase Anya Bilashita Shunyam. So the ta is the ita is added there, Shunyam. So if it was Anya Bilasha Shunyam, it would mean no other desires. But since it is Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying it's speaking about deep-rooted desires. Those must be zero. So we have some hope here. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in death-threatening situations, a devotee may say, "Oh Lord, please save me, your devotee. now from this danger. Because it is a sudden temporary desire, it is not harmful to his bhakti. That is because this desire arises beyond his control, opposite of his devotional nature. That desire is not his nature. So, if a devotee is about to drown and the devotee raises his arms and says, Krishna, please save me, or the devotee is, wanting to, uh, you know, um, what could be another example? Is um, wanting to get some, water to drink, or is just uh, needing something at the moment, the spur of the moment, and says, "Oh Krishna, please help me," then that type of a desire, which is momentary, it is not the motivation behind the activity, but it's simply a momentary desire, that is okay. And that devotee can still be doing pure devotional service even with that momentary desire. Therefore, it is anya bilashita shunyam. That allows these momentary desires. Let me see here. Yes. Therefore, superficial, fleeting desires or desires for self-preservation do not exclude one from pure devotional service. And thus, pure devotional service can be executed in the stage of sadhana bhakti. So, Jiva Goswami, in his commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he writes how he explains that Rupa Goswami in this verse, he's saying that even on the stage of sadhana bhakti, our stage, we can do pure devotional service. Still, it's very difficult. I mean, we have to be on the higher level of sadhana. But we can do it because other desires may come. But if our primary motivation is to please the spiritual master and Krishna, if through our heart and soul we're trying to please Krishna and Prabhupada, and that is what we're doing all the time, and once in a while, there's a desire to, this is what I was thinking of. There's a desire to eat a gulab jamun, or Prabhupada exhibited these desires sometimes. He would ask the devotees, you make puris for me today. You make kachoris for me. There's very specific things that Prabhupada mentioned at times that he wanted. He said, you make, kachoris with sugar and bananas, or something like that. He mentioned that he had a strong desire that day to eat that. Then that desire does not make that service not pure devotional service. There's also the example of, I think her name was Vraja Leela Mataji. She was a disciple of Indradumna Maharaj, where until the very end, she had a desire to eat tomatoes. Her spiritual master asked her, she had leukemia and she was on her deathbed, and her spiritual master asked her, do you have any desires left? Any material desire? And she said, I want to eat tomatoes. And so they arranged for her to eat a tomato. And Maharaj said, if this is your only desire, then you're going back to Godhead. so that these desires, why was he saying that? They're superficial. Her life was not being driven by the desire to eat tomatoes, but she just had a desire to eat a tomato, possibly the pain of the cancer or something, and she just had a desire. In the same way, like Srila Prabhupada had a desire to eat kachoris or puris on a certain day. These things are not inhibitions, are not stopping the flow of pure bhakti. They're incidental. So this tatasya lakshana is karmadhyanavritam. This is free from the anartha of all of karma as well. So we talked about the other things, but what about karma, fruit of activity? One devotee in Bombay asked Prabhupada, should a devotee save a drowning man if he can? Or should he just say that it is materialistic activity? and we are only interested in serving Krishna. So we should not interfere with his karma, and we should let him die. So this is a very difficult, this is what I put it here, very difficult to digest. We're now understanding this from different angles of vision. So the question that the devotee asked Prabhupada is, if some person is drowning and we go and we try to save that person's material body, then isn't that a material activity? Theoretically speaking, I mean, of course we could try to make him into a devotee after that, but assuming that that person won't become a devotee, should we go and save a drowning man? I mean, the same thing is true. Like this is kind of kind of, it seems like a obvious case, but let's say there's famine, which is happening right now um, in certain countries, um, Syria and things like that. There's famine. People don't have food to eat. So should we go there and feed the poor to save them from death? Not exactly to give them Krishna Prasad, but to save them from death. So what should we do? Because bhakti means for Krishna, right? It's not just good works. It's not just on that level. So this is Prabhupada's response. Prabhupada replied that in principle, the devotee should not save him. Should not. Because actually, we have no business interfering with people's actions and reactions. Then Prabhupada said that there's another consideration called loka vikara, or public sentiment. So, although practically every single devotee will do it, theoretically speaking, Prabhupada is saying that the devotee will not save that person because this is all on the material level, actions and reactions. Um, but there's also something called loka vikara, or public sentiment. A devotee may do something which is not strictly included in the category of devotional service out of consideration for public sentiment, so that people don't become hostile to the devotees and thus make it harder for the devotees to preach, or make it harder for them to become devotees also, right? So that people don't, out of compassion for others, their spiritual life, so that people don't become hostile to devotees and therefore accept their message, and therefore don't accept their message, and therefore don't become devotees themselves. But if we think that if I don't do some material pious activities, then I cannot achieve bhakti, or some bad will come to me, that is against the principles of pure devotional service. So Giriraj Maharaj sort of comments on this passage of Prabhupada, that what is Prabhupada trying to communicate here? Well, obviously, if the devotee does not save the drowning man, that drowning man and others will be inhibited from becoming devotees, because they'll think, what type of devotee is this? What type of person is this? So for their spiritual life, a devotee will do this. But the point is that bhakti does not require any material pious activities. Prabhupada did not encourage his disciples to go to places like Bosnia, Syria, where there's war, and risk your life just to give people food. Because, I mean, there is no preaching, or very little. Devotees are preaching actually in Bosnia, but in a situation, extreme situation like that, there's very little preaching avenue. People are just trying to survive. So that is a duty of the governments, and we support that activities. We support wholeheartedly, we support those activities. But the devotee themselves are interested in spreading bhakti, or Krishna's message. They're interested in serving Krishna and doing what Krishna and the devotees want us to do. Because this can be an existential question in a devotee's life. Like, should I go to Africa, or Syria, or these places where people are dying of hunger, and do good works there? Join a health organization, become a doctor there, and do surgeries. But these things are not strictly in the principles of devotional service. We are interested in saving their souls. We are interested in helping their souls connect with Krishna, not just their bodies. So Uttama Bhakti, pure devotional service, is Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam, and that Tasha Lakshana is Anya Bilashata Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. So, just a few quotes here from Prabhupada to, further bathe our mind. To achieve success in self-realization or God realization, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends sthani sthita. You just remain in your present position. You remain as a grihastha or as a brahmana or as a sannyasi, as a businessman, professional man. It doesn't matter. But shruti gatam, tanuvan manobhi. Just try to hear about Krishna. Shrutigatam, oral reception. Shrutigatam means oral reception. Tanuvan manobhi, and try to employ your body, words. Tanuvak mana, mind, engaged in Krishna's service. So this is Prabhupada is helping us here. How do we come to this platform of devotional, of pure devotional service practically? So this Krishna consciousness movement is to give chance to everyone to hear about Krishna. This pure bhakti, meaning this pure devotional service that we saw the definition of, it starts from hearing or shavana. This is the first process, shavana. And when one has heard very nicely about Krishna, then they can speak about Krishna. And he must speak. You cannot remain without speaking. That is the result of Shravanam. Shravanam Kirtanam, one who has heard nicely, he must speak or preach. So all of us must become teachers. When we hear, then we must repeat. And this is the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, which leads to pure devotional service. It is only for our guidance that Srila Rupa Goswami prepared this book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is now presented in the form of the nectar of devotion. Persons engaged in the Krishna consciousness movement may take advantage of this great literature and be very solidly engaged in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so thank you very much. I'll stop here. I think I've spoken over time, yes, quite a while today, and we can open it up for questions.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for the Nectarian class. It was very, very enlightening class, Prabhu. I have a question, Prabhu. In pure devotional service, sometimes I've heard senior devotees, like sometimes they say that Vaishnavas, whether they stay in this world, material world or spiritual world, they are serving regardless.
Mm.
So desire to go to Goloka or to go to Krishna's place,
Mm.
is it still very like we should have that, or we should have that like, okay, doesn't matter where I am,
Mm.
I'm still serving. So is that like going to Goloka is also still a desire?
Yes. So the fact is that on the higher levels of devotion, on the higher levels of bhakti, the devotees don't have the desire to go back home, back to Godhead. They just have a desire to love Krishna and serve him wherever Krishna wants, even in the hellish planets. But Prabhupada says that at this point, we cannot artificially imitate that platform. So on the platform that we are at, we must act on our level of realization. And in our conditioned state in the material world, the fact is that we cannot serve Krishna so nicely. And even pure devotees, they mention this, with this material body, how much can I serve Krishna? I really cannot serve him properly. And also for us, the material conditioning is there. So many things are there. So for us, we must desire to go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, it's a little artificial. If we think, I don't want to go back home, back to Godhead. If we say that, that's because we're actually attached to being in the material world. Or let me be a pure devotee, but still be here in my nice community, in my nice family, in my nice neighborhood. It's actually a result of attachment that we're saying that. It's not out of the spontaneous love. You see, there's a subtle difference of consciousness there. The devotees, pure devotees, they're saying, I don't want to go back home, back to Godhead. I just want to serve you, Krishna, they're saying it out of spontaneous love. If we say, I don't want to go back to Godhead, we're saying it actually out of attachment for the material world. I'm still attached to this place. And as I mentioned before, we should desire to go back to Godhead because we know that this is Krishna's desire. He's inviting us to come back to him. So unless he tells us otherwise, we desire that which is pleasing to Krishna. Remember, anukulyena means that which is pleasing to Krishna. So that's kind of the short answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Prabhu, is it okay if I ask quick short question? One more.
Okay.
Like
Yes.
Prabhu in Shiksha Ashtakam, we always say, right? Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, right?
Yes.
And here, Prabhu, yeah, when we live in material world, we try our best to be in a proper material situations. Like we need enough money to survive. We need enough, like we have to have one car, we have to have house, we have to have this. So
Mm.
these desires automatically come, even though sometimes we don't ask Krishna.
Mm.
But sometimes we are superficially showing that, yes, we definitely need all this to live. So how would you correct that mentality, Prabhu?
Yes. And see, this is why I put those final quotes of Srila Prabhupada there, because um, just so we don't feel discouraged, right? Prabhupada is saying, he's recognizing that we're not on the level of pure bhakti, but this is how we get to that level. He says, sthanistita, stay in the position that we are. Like you're saying, we need the home, we need the job, we need the car, but hearing and chanting. And gradually we get purified to the point where we realize we don't need these things. But, it takes time. It won't come immediately. Another thing this just reminds me of is that you'll notice that disagreements between devotees, they often take place when our relationship with the devotee comes on the material platform, meaning that we start to help one another on the material level. Or let me help this devotee, get a better job. Let me help this devotee do this or that. We should be helpful. This is devotee care. We should definitely do that. But this is that word, karma dhyanavritam. And what Prabhupada was saying, that we really don't have much to do with actions and reactions in this world. If we're too much in the consciousness of, you scratch my back, I scratch your back, let's all become rich together, it's no longer bhakti. Like devotees, sometimes they make these business relationships very dangerous because it's no longer bhakti. It's all now on the level of karma. We're devotees, we're acting together as devotees, but what's the content of our activity? It's all about house and money, and let me find you a nice house, and let me, you know, that then becomes materialistic very easily. And then on that materialistic level, there's often disagreements. So we should help devotees spiritually. We should keep the relationship on a spiritual level, and then it will inspire devotion, bhakti. In the same way, in our family life, we don't try to please our family too much in terms of material prosperity. We keep the material things on a basic minimum. We, to answer your question on terms of the material things that we need, those things are minimum. What we realize that we need is the spiritual nourishment, and that's the way we help our family, and that's how it becomes gradually pure devotional service. So the material, simple, spiritual, more and more.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Brandy, I think you're next.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. So I had a series of questions. In the reading, I got a little, not confused, but I wanted to ask about Boga Tyaga, where it's, I thought of it as like a pendulum oscillating back and forth between your devotional service. And I was trying to understand if when swinging back and forth, somebody could at times be engaged in pure devotional service. But then throughout your lecture, I thought, okay, well, I understand this, like it has to be consistent. yeah, it has to be consistent and constant and favorable. And I was like, okay, well, I understand. So it's not really, but then you were talking about just activities like cleaning the temple and things like that. And anybody can engage in an activity like that. That's the beauty of bhakti.
Yes.
So can you kind of explain that a little bit if you understand my confusion?
Yes, and actually both things. So it's actually a good question because on one hand, for it to be pure devotional service, it should be continuous. Specific word is used, tailadhara, like oil flows. It doesn't break when it flows, unlike water. It flows continuously. Pure devotion is continuous. At the same time, due to the mercy of the devotee and Krishna, a devotee can experience not because they're doing pure devotional service, but as a result of the mercy, the effort on the devotee and the mercy of the Lord and the devotees, a new devotee, aspiring devotee, can actually experience feelings of bhava and prema. That is the highest level of pure devotion momentarily, moments of it. They can feel that ecstasy because of the mercy of the devotees. So that's there, but it's for a different reason. And why is that? That's because Krishna wants to give us a taste. And this is the taste that most of us get in our initial days in Krishna consciousness, that pull the devotees in, right? And that then they try to like recreate in years of their spiritual practice. Why initially they get those feelings? Because Krishna is giving that undeserved mercy, which I think you have experienced, others have experienced. That's that, that initial taste that is so special, and that then kind of goes down, and then we then have to then work ourselves up.
Yeah. And then I had so many questions. It's hard.
Let's do one at a time because
sorry.
the list
Okay.
is really long. So this was a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. It was a very nice one.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was a really
Thank
great
you.
class.
I'll come back to you if we have time. Yes.
No worries. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Swati Mataji, you're next.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, thank you so much for the wonderful class. So, Prabhuji, my question was around the, section where the devotee questioned, a person is drowning, are you going to save him? And I was surprised by Srila Prabhupada's answer, because I think that compassion for others is a very important quality of a devotee. So wouldn't a person in that situation think that, okay, Krishna has put me in this situation to help this other person who's drowning, instead of just focusing on what others will think? Shouldn't one intrinsically try to help another person when it's a life and death situation, especially a devotee? Thank you.
Yes, honestly speaking, because we have to be honest in spiritual life, I honestly cannot really ascertain myself Prabhupada's response. I can't understand it. That why the devotee, Prabhupada is saying simply for consideration of what people will say, or consideration of whether or not the devotee can spread Krishna consciousness. That's the reason the devotee will do it. Otherwise, they won't. I cannot ascertain that, but philosophically, I can understand why Srila Prabhupada is saying that, because the devotee is doing it, and that's what Prabhupada is exactly saying, is that the devotee is doing it so that that person and others can become devotees. They can come to Krishna. But the devotee is not doing it because the devotee wants to save the mature body or help the mature body of that person. Because this is Arjuna's dilemma, right? Arjuna wants to protect the bodies of his relatives. So the devotee has compassion, but the devotee has a compassion for their soul. And they know that, okay, this person will become a devotee if I try to save them, hopefully. But like Prabhupada is saying, in principle, theoretically speaking, the devotee does not have compassion for the body, but for the soul, for their spiritual life. And if that person is drowning, then it's possibly, it's relieving their past karma, which again, we cannot preach in this way at all. This is only very confidential knowledge for our own Krishna consciousness and amongst devotees, that one is doing it simply, one, that is karma, that is, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says actually that material prosperity is a bad thing. Poverty is a good thing. How can we think along those lines? We read the news and we're thinking, oh, I hope Biden does the right thing so that people get money, and so that we don't go in another depression. But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his vision, as he was saying, is good when life is difficult for people, because then they come to spiritual life, and this is a fact, right? The less prosperous countries, people go to the church, temple, all these things in greater numbers. And many times the atheists, they use it as proof. See, there's no God. It's just out of desperation people go. But we use it as an argument. We say, no, because there's less material fever, therefore people are going to the temple. So the love is unlimited that the devotee has for the soul. We cannot underestimate. We cannot think, oh, the devotee is callous. They have unlimited love for the soul. But the point is, it's for the soul. It's not for the body.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I thought, like devotees above the modes. When we discussed Bhagavad Gita, we were talking about the 3 modes, and saving someone in such a situation would, I think, come under the mode of goodness. So devotee being above that. So it's just a little hard for me to digest, but thank you for your explanation.
Yes. No, and there's a comment in the chat room, a chat, that even Prabhupada, when he was seeing children who were very poor, that were fighting with the dogs for food, he had tears coming down his eyes. And the tears were seeing their dire material situation. That, look, they're fighting with the dogs. Because Prabhupada mentioned that. He was saying, look, this is what civilization has become, that human beings are fighting with dogs for food. He didn't exactly say, look, these people are in nescience and they don't have Krishna Prasad. He was feeling for their condition. So the devotee does have feelings. He has compassion, and he knows that the soul is suffering in this dire material situation. I think, like I was explaining, the Prabhupada's principle here was that the point that he was getting across, and that's why context is as important as the text. We should not take Prabhupada's words out of context. We have to see them in context. The Prabhupada is saying that that a devotee knows that he cannot come in the middle of someone's karma. The devotee, does not. Prabhupada did not allow devotees to go to far out places just to do food relief programs. He said prasadam distribution should be there, but it should be, near our temples. The prasad should be attracting them to Krishna. It should be done regularly as a way of cultivating them spiritually. So he was most concerned. The point is, the material help was there to help them spiritually, because they just realize, they have that vision that the material pains and pleasures are so temporary. So,
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, Pushpanjali Mataji, you're next.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the class. Prabhuji, question from previous class. I'm not able to understand clearly Nitya Baddha and Nitya Siddha. Like Nitya Baddha, I understand like people who have fallen. So I am Nitya Baddha. So even if I get liberated, I think I can never be called Nitya Siddha because I did fall. And for how long? I mean, if I even fell once, then I think I never deserve to be called Nitya Siddha. So can you please explain who are really Nitya Siddhas, and like Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, like what is their category? How can we distinguish people like who fell and then got liberated and then went compared to people
Very
who
nice
never
question.
fall?
Yes, Mataji. Anyone who's in the spiritual world, including ourselves, is Nitya Siddha. You may say, well, how? Because I was in the material world, right? But Prabhupada says anyone in the spiritual world is Nitya Siddha. Why? Because the spiritual world is beyond time, beyond material time. So once we are there, we've always been there. And another reason why we're Nitya Siddha, once we return, so to say, to the spiritual world, is because we never left. How do we not leave? I'm right now in the material world. We only imagine that we leave. We truly fall, but we fall in our imagination. Uh, the example that the Bhagavatam gives is the dream. When a person, just like last night, I went to, I didn't, but just as an example, last night I went to Disneyland, right? Let's say I went to Disneyland in my dream. So I never left my room. I never fell from my bed. But in my dream, I went to Disneyland. But I didn't go to Disneyland. I just thought I went there in my dream. So the same thing, the soul leaves the spiritual world and enters a dream world. And this material world is a dream world. And when the soul returns to its actual consciousness, the soul just returns to the place that it's always been, which is the spiritual world. So we close our eyes, we go in the material world, and then once we get liberated, we open it up again, we find ourselves in the spiritual world. So anyone who's in the spiritual world is Nitya Siddha. We are all Nitya Siddhas. Now, what about Nitya Baddha? So if we're Nitya Siddha, how can we be eternally conditioned? Well, because we are here for such a long period of time, therefore we are called Nitya Baddha. But that Nitya is not a literal Nitya. That is a more figurative Nitya. Just like I say, this like someone, my neighbor has a dog, right? The dog is a very lazy dog. So someone says, that dog is always sleeping. The dog is always sleeping. Now, the fact is, he does eat. He does get up and eat. And then as soon as he eats, he falls back to sleep again. But figuratively speaking, he's always sleeping. So same thing, because we've been sleeping for such a long time, we are Nitya Baddha, but not literally speaking. No one is Nitya Baddha, because everyone ultimately finds their way out of this material world.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. What about Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, and they're in a different category, right?
Yes. So they are also Nitya Siddhas, but they are of a different category. They cannot fall, like we were saying last time. They're Nitya Siddhas. We are also Nitya Siddhas, but they're part of Krishna's internal energy. So they can never be Nitya Baddha. That's the thing. They can never be Nitya Baddha.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Ambika Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. Thank you
Hare.
very much for explaining such a wonderful verse actually, because I have heard this verse so many times in so many lectures, but not exactly understanding, such a deeper meaning. So thank you very much for that. So I had a quick question and then I had a question. So the first quick question I had is, you are quoting so many quotes from Prabhupada's lectures and previous acharyas. So I mean, and I'm sure there is a way to find them, but I don't know. So how can we, let's say, if we are talking about something and if we want to quote or reference that something with Prabhupada's lecture or quote, where can we find that, maybe on a specific topic, especially maybe something like false ego or devotional service, or you know is there a way to just kind of look for those quotes, or uh,
So I actually have received this from Janmashtami Prabhu. So Janmashtami Prabhu is he for many years was the headmaster of the MIHE, Mayapur Institute for Higher Education, which was teaching Bhakti Shastri. And he received it from someone else. Basically, like there's so many quotes of Srila Prabhupada, like so much literature there. But the more my experience is just that you'll hear certain quotes and things more regularly repeated by devotees, and those are kind of like the jewels that they're passing on to us, you see. So our whole process is like parampara, it's descending. So like even in our acharyas commentaries, you will notice they quote certain verses more often than others, because Jiva Goswami is getting it from Rupa Goswami may be getting something from Ramanujacharya. And so it's all just a network. It's kind of like, I'm sure at work you notice this, right? In your own professions, there's so many so many software books, there's so many websites, there's so many things, but certain things are just people who are practicing it. They know, okay, these are the important verses, these are the quotes, these are the people, these are the books. So it's just like that. There's no um, the more we study, the more we associate, more even than study, but like Bhagavatam classes and things like that, we'll start hearing the same things, we'll start noticing different things, and then we can keep our own book of favorite quotes, and make a list of things that we really like, so we don't lose them.
Yes, Prabhuji. So would it be possible, I think, for you to share some of these favorite quotes or, like letters or something with, all of us, the students of Bhakti Shastri?
Well, that's what I try to do in the slides. So that's my effort, and there's also very good study guides. So a lot of it is from the study guides. There's also one other book that is a very detailed study guide of Nectar Devotion, and that's used very often. And I didn't share that with you until now because I didn't want to overwhelm people. But eventually everyone can get this. It's called here. I'm not sure if you can see this. Let me.
Yes, Waves of Devotion.
Waves of Devotion, and this is on the entire Nectar of Devotion. But the first 19 chapters, pretty much all the study guides are based on this. It's very, very nice, and this whole explanation that I gave, it's in this book in a very detailed way. So this is something very nice to get. It's called the Waves of Devotion. It's available just from one website. Um, so I'll share that with all of you, and everyone can get it. But if you have this book, it's like the encyclopedia. So
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you, thank you. So now I'm going to come to my question. I mean, I again, I am like Brandy Mataji. I have so many things in my mind, but I think I'm just going to focus on one thing right now. So you were explaining Mataji in a previous question. I think I forgot who was that. But devotees don't help other devotees. I mean, they do help, but we don't help on a material platform like getting them a better job or giving them this or that. And you do help them in a spiritual ways. You want to make send them more rounds, or you want them to read Bhagavatam, attend classes, things like that. You want to help them so their spiritual journey is better, or they have spiritual life, devotional life. So uh, in that process, the person who is trying to help other devotee, uh, they do help, but sometimes the devotees who are being helped, they, whether they are neophyte, they don't know much about bhakti, or maybe sometimes just because of oversight or whatever, they don't appreciate the person who is helping them. uh, so the person who is helping the other person, that devotee sometimes feel that why I'm not being appreciated. Again, we should not have that. The more sincere we get into our bhakti, we will not have that bhav that why I'm not being appreciated. But you still, I hear from devotees that okay, we are not appreciated, or like I have done so much service, still like you said, this and this devotee who is being senior, they haven't treated me nicely. So I mean, how do you deal, especially I'm talking about myself, that when I get into that situation, if I'm not being appreciated, how should I handle myself? Or so that's my part. And then like what is the best way to appreciate also others for their service or their help to you?
yes. So just to clarify, so we should help devotees. I mean, Vaishnav Seva is the heart of our movement. What I was referring to is, and thank you for the clarification. What I was referring to is um, where the idea exactly is not that I'm helping a devotee, but rather with this devotee, I can get some material benefit. If I work, so let's say, like devotees, they start to, do business together, land together. That's all okay because we're not on the level of pure devotional service if we want to do it with another devotee. But we should not think that just because I'm doing it with a devotee, this is all devotional service, uh, because it can become materialistic. And I've seen it just over time, my experience where devotees sometimes buy land together or they invest in something together, and then it becomes a whole mess, some misunderstanding. And then their devotional life suffers also because the spiritual relationship suffers because of the material circumstance. So, so we have to keep our relationships on a spiritual level. And then, of course, if we are not pure devotees and we're also, working together on material level, that's okay. But we just recognize, okay, this is the business side, and this is not pure bhakti is not getting involved too much in all of these things. So then, if we keep it on that level, then it will be more. Then we won't get that reaction. In other words, that the problem comes when our bhakti becomes very mixed. Then we want, like you're saying, all these things. Then we want recognition, we want honor, all these things. So the more simple we keep our devotion and our motivation, that I don't want the honor, I don't want the respect, the happier we'll be. And then we'll be more, pure devotion on that level.
Yes, Prabhuji, but you explain it such a nice in a one sentence, simple sentence, but it's so difficult, Prabhuji, to practice and follow. So that's what I was, trying to get some more explanation. I mean, obviously your mind is your friend and your mind is your enemy. So, but
Actually,
it is so
yeah.
difficult to, like, okay, yeah, you don't want honor, I mean, you don't want honor for, or you don't want recognition for helping other devotees even in their spiritual life, but you see that sometimes they ignore you, or they just are nicer or better with other devotees. In that situation, how would you comprehend? uh,
Well, it's like we say, right, when we are strong, then we can face the world around us, right? When we are strong, then we can deal with anything that is around us. And when we are weak ourselves, then we have difficulty dealing with the rest of the world. So these problems become very minor if we ourselves are strong spiritually. If we ourselves are in touch with Krishna, if we have a taste for Krishna, then these things won't matter so much. Because, like you're saying, ultimately there is no solution for these things. This is the nature of the mature world. So the only solution is actually that we transcend them. They don't matter to us so much. What matters to us is Krishna pleased, right? Anukulyena. This is what it's about. Is Krishna pleased? Okay, I know that Krishna is being pleased because the Guru is pleased, because the Vaishnavas are pleased, because my teacher or whoever it is happy. So that's what's important to me.
Thank you, Prabhuji, you nailed it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anandmaya Prabhu. Anandmaya Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandat Pranam.
Dandat Pranam Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhu, I actually wanted some clarification around two examples that you shared in the class. One was Prabhupada desiring kachori and puri, and the other Mataji who wanted tomatoes while she was leaving her body against in the, I think not the previous slide before, not the one before that, but a couple of slides before that, where you were saying that renunciation, right? Renunciation itself is also a desire. So if you can elaborate a little more on it, because I'm
Right.
trying to connect these, and somehow it didn't make sense to me, Prabhu.
Right.
And that's
Okay. Nice point.
my I couldn't understand. I'm sure other devotees could, but if you can elaborate a little more, because in my opinion the renunciation also is for Krishna. I'm not talking about the outwardly world, the outside world, but within amongst devotees, if they are trying to be austere, if they're ultimately doing it for Krishna. So why does that become a desire, and why is why the other examples not a desire?
Yes. So this is actually one of the key verses of Nectar devotion that we come to which is anasaktasya vishayan yathartham upayunjata nirbandha krishna sambandhe yukta vairagam uchyate. So Rupa Goswami, he defines what real renunciation is. And that's the difference there, the distinction that we're making. Renouncing something may be a disservice to Krishna. Like in the story of Radhanath Maharaj, Maharaj's journey home, when he was living in the caves, he was not of much use to the world and Krishna in terms of preaching. So his renunciation was a disservice to Krishna. That's what he realized. It was a service because it brought him more on the path of bhakti. But ultimately, he realized in a more advanced level that that was a disservice to Krishna. That was false renunciation because it's not yukta vairagam. It's not the real renunciation is when we use everything that we have in Krishna's service. So he had renounced everything, but he had not used everything that he had. That is his resources, his speaking power, his intelligence, his way of communicating. He was not using that in Krishna's service while living alone in the cave. So that renunciation has to be given up. That renunciation is jnana karma dinavratam. It is an anartha. But material desires, material desires, those have to be given up. Desires that are coming in the way of our devotional service. So I want a Mercedes, so therefore I'm spending money on Mercedes rather than serving Krishna. That is coming in the way of my service to Krishna. Now, in the case of the tomatoes and kachoris, those desires are not false renunciation. It's not giving up something that can be used in Krishna's service, nor are they material desires that are coming in the way of Krishna. Those are just incidental desires. Those are not as deep as one's nature. So a devotee wants to eat a tomato. So that doesn't mean that they're not a pure devotee anymore. They want to eat a tomato. That's what it is. It's just what it is. It's like a devotee wants to brush his teeth. It's just because, well, obviously for a service, but even the devotee may want to brush his teeth just because, you feel better, you feel cleaner. So is that a material desire? No, it's not. It's just incidental. And that's what Rupa Goswami is saying. Those are small desires that are part of also the rasa and who the devotee is in relation to Krishna. Like especially in the case of Prabhupada, those are kind of different examples, but Prabhupada was known as Kachori Mukhi, and that was possibly related with his rasa with Krishna. We don't know. But in the case of Rajalila Mataji, that was just a little incidental desire that was left. That was not stopping her from her devotion to Krishna. It was just one of the things that kind of had to flow through her system. It was just a kind of a remaining, like side thing.
Now, also, Prabhu, so if the renunciation is for Krishna, now this example that you gave of Radhanath Swami, may have been, I think what you referred is for his own sake, he wanted, to be renounced and be away in the cave and so on. But if that renunciation is for Krishna, then I believe it's no longer a desire and it's complete devotional service, isn't it, Prabhu?
Yes. And that's why Maharaj and also our previous acharyas like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there are periods of time like 6-7 years where they were living in a hut or a cave, because that was the lifetime and preparation part. That was for Krishna. They were inspired by Krishna to lead that life, to going back to Ambika Mataji's question, to strengthen themselves from inside so that they could deal with the world outside. So that was directly inspired by Krishna, and that the acharyas show. And like I say, devotees, we can't say from the outside what it was, but what Maharaj was saying in his book was that was, in his case, not directly inspired by Krishna. That was something that he transcended as a result of meeting Prabhupada, that he understood the true meaning of renunciation. So the point is that that renunciation is something that is for Krishna alone, for Krishna's service. Yes.
Got it. Understood, Prabhu. Thank you. But the austerities that devotees perform, now devotees for Krishna, but the austerities that perform, sometimes when devotees are not so elevated, and I count myself in that. Uh, Prabhu, say for example, they are doing an Ekadashi, they're doing a Nirjala Ekadashi, right? That there is a desire in the mind that I get the benefit of this, right? Isn't that a desire itself? I mean, yes, the ultimate goal is Krishna. Krishna will be pleased by performing, Nirjala Ekadashi, but there is a desire. Isn't that
Right. But see, the desire, like you're saying, the desire should be that I'm doing Ekadashi to favorably to please Krishna. Because Krishna is pleased when we, and Lord Chaitanya is pleased when we do Ekadashi. The desire, the reason why we're doing Ekadashi should not be for the benefits that are written there, that you get, that you get long life and health and all these things. And that's why there's this one book that was written, Ekadashi, the Day of Lord Hari, by I think Bhavananda Maharaj or some Swami who's no longer in the movement. And I think the GBC said that this book was not bona fide because it was Ekadashi and these are the results. You get this, you get a flat screen TV and you get 3-car garage, like it's kind of like that motivation that Ekadashi this, then you get this. And what the devotees pointed out is that we don't do Ekadashi for those reasons, though those reasons are there, but we do it on the platform of Raganuga Bhakti, not on that platform, but aiming towards that platform, because this is what pleases Krishna. Out of love for Krishna, we do it. So that's the goal.
So we often read, the Ekadashi stories from ISKCON Desire Tree. Oh, sorry, I'll just take one more quick second. I know devotees are waiting.
Yes.
We often, on the days of Ekadashi, we read the ISKCON Desire Tree stories, and then,
Yes.
of course, a lot of what you're saying is mentioned in those, the results, the merits, and so on. So is that not a good idea? Just do it for
But
Krishna.
we can read them. Even in the Bhagavatam, sometimes certain chapters give you results. But we can read them. There's no harm in reading them. But we are more concerned with the spiritual benefits that people received as a result of doing Ekadashi. In other words, we are concerned with wanting to advance spiritually for the pleasure of Krishna. So, you read Ekadashi that such and such person became a great devotee because accidentally they fasted on that day, in a temple and all these things like this. So those things help us. Now, incidentally, there might be other benefits there, but those are like lollipops. They're sometimes meant to attract us when we are not on the level of pure devotion. And this book that I was mentioning, it was focusing too much on those things. Therefore, the GBC said, no, we don't want to use this book. It was some book. I don't remember what it was. I don't even remember the title. I might have the wrong title. But the point simply being that we don't do Ekadashi for the material benefits. There are many material benefits, but we don't do it for that reason.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. I think that was very clearly understood. But when you read stories like this and you understand that these were the merits obtained by people who've done it, that's obviously at the back of your mind sometimes, and you don't want to meditate on it, but subconsciously you're reading
Yeah.
it in your subconscious mind. But thank you for the clarification. Dear devotees, sorry for it taking a little longer. My apologies. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. No, it's a nice point, Prabhu. Thank you very much. It is. Kishore Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for
Krishna.
wonderful class.
Thank you.
Prabhu, I have, like you mentioned, we worship only Krishna, right? The two Vrindavan Krishna. So, so Vrindavan Krishna is nothing but Nandanandan Krishna. I heard in from one of the Srila Prabhupada lectures, we worship only in Sri Nandanandan Krishna. Right? Both are same, right?
Yeah. So Vrindavan Krishna means Krishna in Vrindavan. And that's all the same. Yashoda Nandana, Nanda Nandana, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Gopinath, Madan Mohan. These are all Vrindavan Krishna, just different names of Vrindavan Krishna. So in Vrindavan, Krishna is more often known by the names of his devotees than he is known by his own name. So that's the point that you're, I think, mentioning. That Krishna is known more as Yashoda Nandana or Nanda Nandana than he is known as Krishna. Because Krishna feels more pleasure being referred to in relation to his devotees than he does by his own name. So he's known as the son of Nanda. He's not known as Krishna, but he's special not because he's Krishna, but he's special because he's the son of Nanda Maharaj. And he's special because he's the son of Mother Yashoda. And that's what makes him more special. So this is in Vrindavan. Outside of Vrindavan, the mood is that, well, even in Vrindavan, I should not say that, but the highest mood in Vrindavan is that not that we are Krishnas, but that Krishna is ours. So when Krishna belongs to a devotee, it becomes all the more sweet.
Yeah, thank you, bro. One more question, bro.
Yes.
Like, according to reading this Nectar of Devotion, should we, like, for this class, should I go ahead and read the second chapter, or there are like chapters are very small here, so
Yes.
should we go ahead read like how we can
Yes, you
correlate
can
this?
read ahead. I know I'm going a little slow. Just these first two classes. Now after this, the speed will increase. But
Okay.
but just these two classes, you definitely please read ahead. Read as far as you can. It will help you, because once we get going, we'll cover like maybe 2 or 3 chapters in a week, because we're going to go faster. So yes, you can read ahead. But for this week, the required homework will be just the introduction, because chapter 1 is the 6 characteristics of devotional service, and that I'll cover next time. But that that goes quick. Here's the 6 characteristics. So then I'll do like chapter 1 and chapter 2 and maybe even chapter 3, like that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, bro.
These 2 sections, the preface and introduction, are very foundational. So we spent more time.
Okay, sure, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Madhava Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for today's class. Prabhuji, you were saying how Rupa Goswami is specifically mentioning about like Rajindananda and Krishna, and how all other expansions, all Krishna and all other Krishnas are in him. So as Gaudiya, for us, real pure devotional service means spontaneous platform. And the Vaikuntavasis are also doing pure devotional service. So when Rupa Goswami is saying that pure devotional service is only towards Krishna and Braja, but we also know that Vaikuntavasis are also doing pure devotional service. So is Rupa Goswami, is he talking about that? Is he specifically referring to like the highest level of devotional service, as like that is real bhakti because that is the highest? Like, what is the difference of, because Vaikuntavasis are pure devotionals, are doing pure devotional service, and so are Brajavasis. So what's the difference?
Yes. So actually, it's I made this a bit complicated. I should not have. So both are doing pure devotional service. The Vaikuntavasis and the Brajavasis, they are doing pure devotional service because they have no ulterior motive. They're doing it for Krishna continuously. But the Vaikuntavasis, Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, their level is on the regulated platform. It's on the platform of Vaidhi sadhana, whereas on the platform of Vrindavan Bhakti, it becomes spontaneous, right? Spontaneous, pure love for Krishna. Now, sometimes the way Prabhupada defines pure devotional service is that pure devotional service, it means spontaneous love for Krishna. And so therefore, if you take that definition of pure devotional service, then they're not doing pure devotional service in Vaikuntha. So it just depends what definition you're using. But just strictly speaking, based upon the definition that we've seen today, the Vaikuntavasis would also be doing pure devotional service.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Okay, anyone else have a burning question? Okay, so thank you very much. We're at a good time. We'll stop at this point. Thank you for your kind attention. And next week, I'll send out your homework during the week. The remaining few exams that I've left to grade, I'll grade those. Again, reminder, if you please resend it to me if you didn't receive your exam, and I'll send your homework, and next week we will continue. So please read ahead and dive into this ocean of bhakti. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.